Welcome. This is James Corbett of corbettreport.com, and it is currently the 4th of May 2012. And once again, we're joined on the line by Syrian Girl. So, Syrian Girl, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me here.
Well, as viewers and listeners might remember, we had you on the program a few weeks ago now, to talk about what's happening in Syria. But obviously a lot has been happening since then. Why don't you bring people up to date about what's been happening?
Well, as we all suspected, the ceasefire was a complete failure. And both sides are, Russia is blaming the insurgency and NATO. Well, Lavrov said it was the countries who are funding the insurgency, and we all know who those are, for the break of the ceasefire. And this is because there's been a number of suicide bombings in Damascus area and in the Aleppo area and in a city called Idlib. Also, the US side is blaming the Syrian military and the Syrian government. But at the end of the day, if you look at whose interest it was for the ceasefire to break, it's clearly in the US interest and in NATO's interest for the ceasefire to fail, so it can go back to the Security Council and further intervention, probably with sanctions, UN sanctions, which won't be as the sanctions are now, where the sanctions are basically optional. You know, a country can choose to apply sanctions to Syria or not. UN sanctions imply that the countries are bound by international law all across the world to sanction Syria. So I think that was the agenda behind putting up this ceasefire and then causing it to break. Now, the thing is, however, that yes, there have been a lot of bombings, but as a result, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that these insurgent groups have to be squashed. So Syria's military has basically a green light from Russia to continue to push back these groups who were given cover by the ceasefire agreement, because as a result of the Syrian military pullback, now these insurgent groups have regrouped and regrown, and they're getting more brazen with their attacks. And yesterday, in the city of Aleppo, the Aleppo University was attacked, and 22 Syrian soldiers who came in were killed. So, it's been a continuation of increasing momentum and bombings and sectarian violence. People are getting kidnapped for ransom, some by just criminals and some by criminals that are related to these insurgent groups, so that it will help fund the insurgency. So that's what's been happening recently.
And exactly as you indicate, I think the pieces are just falling into place exactly as we thought they would, with the media, of course, not reporting on such things as the Syrian troops being killed, but dwelling on civilian deaths, as reported by groups like Human Rights Watch, which came out with a document recently purporting to document the supposed crimes against humanity committed by the Syrian troops in Idlib. So, of course, we see all of this playing out pretty much as you say, as we thought it would. And you note Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, is, as always, trying to put the brakes on this process. But realistically, I don't know what we can expect to come from that. What do you really, do you think there's any way to derail this process as you've put it forward? Or do you think that that basically it's inevitable that the UN is going to be persuaded to act in that manner?
Well, Russia could veto again. It would be difficult for them to do so, but they still could. Also, Syria is supposed to have some cards to play that it hasn't played yet. And the rumor is, and I can't prove that this is true, that Syria actually has captured foreign troops from France and I think maybe Britain. And they're using, and they're not actually saying anything about this in order to use it for leverage. So that could come out, in the UN Security Council that something like that could come out. I'm not sure if at the end of the day they will get their sanctions. I don't feel that they will. However, it's not the be-all and end-all for them. They're still destabilizing Syria, and they're still creating this. It's like an equilibrium right now. But at the end of the day, Syria is the loser because people are dying on both sides, and the bystanders are dying, and the economy is getting more and more destroyed. So for Syria's enemies, it's still a good outcome for them. So something has to change. Something has to be drastically changed from the Syrian side. Otherwise, the end game would be a divided Syria.
Exactly right. I mean, I think it's obvious that the momentum is on the side of the people who are trying to destabilize the country right now, because all they have to do is maintain chaos and make sure that the deaths continue to happen, and that really is a type of win for them. So it raises the question. I mean, what can really be done to swing the momentum in the other direction? What could be done to re-stabilize a country like this?
Well, the elections are planned for the 7th of May, and the U.S. I find it quite ironic is quite upset that the elections are taking place, even though this supposed democracy that's supposed to happen. Also, you have the opposition groups in Syria that are not linked to the insurgency. The insurgency call themselves the Free Syrian Army. These opposition groups are internal, and they're against foreign intervention, and they're against the insurgency. But we're supposed to be told that we're supposed to believe that this insurgency is pro-democracy, when in fact it itself has led to some of these internal opposition members to flee the country to Lebanon. So it's quite clear that these people are not for democracy, not for freedom of speech. They're after power, and they have a very strong sectarian element in them. So if the elections take place and there's a good turnout and there's international observers, then it would be very difficult politically for the US to continue to support, at least out in the open, to continue to support this sectarian element. What else? I'm not really sure. I feel, and this is difficult for me to say, but I feel a way out for Syria is to go on the offensive and to actually attack the countries that are sending in troops, money to destabilize Syria. So I think when it comes down to it, when Syria is cornered, it will probably attack either Israel or Turkey or Qatar. So that's one way out for Syria.
Well, it certainly would at least make sense from the perspective of, for example, if the U.S. was being attacked by some sort of insurgency that was forming and getting funds from Canada or something, we would expect the U.S. would be invading Canada overnight. There wouldn't be any debate about it. So one would see that would be just a reciprocation. But in the long run, I don't think that could possibly be an answer, because, of course, that would be exactly the type of provocation that the UN and the international community is waiting for to justify a crackdown on Syria and to start the bombing.
Well, I don't think they would mind to see a Syria-Turkey war. Turkey wouldn't be quite happy about it, but they would be pressured into it. So, there was so much talk about a no-fly zone at the very beginning, and there was so much talk of a potential World War III. I still think that there is potential for that. However, now on reflection, I feel that it's been a form of brinkmanship, where what the US is just and NATO makes it seem as though they are ready to start a world war, and it's playing a game of chicken. And Russia stepped up to this game and said, "Well, we're ready too," and then we just see escalation from both sides, and you wonder if there was any real intention for such a global war to happen. maybe it will become this way. Maybe at the beginning it wasn't. It's hard to read, but because of this, and looking at Syria's air defense, Syria has the fifth largest air defense in the world, only surpassed by countries like Russia. The anti-air missiles are quite effective. So to have a no-fly zone against Syria is quite ridiculous, because it would mean suicide for the planes that are sent in. And looking at NATO and the US's history, they always tend to attack countries that can't fight back and that are weak. So I don't actually think that was an option to begin with. I think that they made it seem that way to get these insurgencies and foreign elements inside Syria to continue to fight in the hope that they're going to receive foreign backing. So looking at things from this way, if Syria does ignite things and does start a war, it could be someone's gonna lose the war, someone's gonna win the war, but some might argue that that's the whole agenda of the New World Order, just to start a global war. But if Syria is destroyed, then it might start anyway. It might end up that way anyway, because Syria is a very important piece of the puzzle for Russia, and to have at least one country in the Middle East that can threaten the missile defense treaty. So if war is going to start either way, it's better to start it on our terms, if you know what I mean.
I do understand that, but I always hesitate at that, because I don't think global war can possibly be an answer or end in a good way. But I understand that it does seem that they're setting it up to happen anyway. Of course, always the people lose, and the military powers that be are unfortunately always going to win in those types of scenarios. So there has to be a way to find that we can, I guess, engineer some sort of situation where the so-called leaders can have their face-saving moment and de-escalate the situation. But again, it's difficult to imagine what that would look like. But let's step back and let's take a look at that bigger agenda that you talk about, because obviously Syria is just one piece of a much larger puzzle that's going on an international scale right now. And we bring in the specter of the New World Order, a global government, global wars, these types of things. Where do you think the Syria situation finds itself in that bigger picture?
Well, the reason to attack Syria is not just one reason. There's many reasons. And of course, as I talked about last time, one of the reasons is Israel. And because Syria is in opposition to Israel and has been for many, many, many decades. In fact, since the inception of Israel, Syria has been one of Israel's enemy number one, and they stand in the way of Israel's plan to grow. But also, an attack on Syria is an attack on Russia, and it's also, because it's an attack on Iran, it's also a way on attack on China. And if you look at the what's happening right now with the war games in the South China Sea, where Syria fits in, it's not just a country that just another country on the list. It's sitting in such a place that is between Asia and Europe, and there was talk of a pipeline going through Iran, Iraq, Syria, which would rival the pipeline that's already there, the TBC pipeline that's going through Israel. So all of this going around Syria, it's not just the internal politics in Syria that are determining what's happening. It's much more the external politics around Syria that is creating the situation inside Syria. And that's NATO and the US and Israel's rivalry with Russia, China, Iran, the emerging countries. I know they have a name. I forgot about what it is.
The BRIC countries?
The BRICS countries, yeah. So that's what's happening right now. It's almost like the return of the Cold War in a way.